9 days ago. Renee Good died because she cared about her neighbors. In the words of her wife, Becca Good, Renee was a Christian who knew that all religions teach the same essential truth. We are here to love each other, care for each other, and keep each other safe and whole. Thank you. A few more housekeeping items before we begin. While today's event is not a formal hearing, I will operate it as if it were, with opening statements from our witnesses and 4 minutes of questions from our members. Members, there is a timer here in the center of the screen. I hope you can see it. We will try to make sure you can. I have also been asked to make you aware of the expectations for decorum in this committee room. We ask that everyone here today be seated when they are in the hearing room. We ask that you refrain from standing or sitting in the walkways or aisles. If you need further accommodation, please communicate with staff. Please leave all signs outside under this building's rules. Signs are not permitted in the hearing room or at the witness table. Clapping and other disruptions are not allowed. Thank you to the Minnesota Senate Sergeant at Arms Office, U.S. Capitol Police, and the Minnesota State Patrol Capitol security personnel who are present to help us maintain this decorum in the hearing room. I now recognize myself for 4 minutes for an opening statement. As the ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee, I've been holding a series of accountability hearings titled Kidnapped and Disappeared on how the Trump administration has targeted and terrorized people of all immigration statuses, including U.S. citizens, violating constitutional rights and court orders, destroying our existing immigration system, and eroding all of our rights. Today is the 6th hearing in that series as we continue our congressional duties on this fact-finding mission at a time of intense trauma and terror for Minnesotans who are being subjected to the lawlessness and violence of ICE and Border Patrol agents. The Minnesota Star-Tribune editorial board described it this way, quote, "Battalions of armed federal agents are moving through neighborhoods, transit hubs, malls, and parking lots, and staging near churches, mosques, and schools. Strangers with guns have metastasized in spaces where daily life should be routine and safe. It feels like a military occupation. The occupation of Minnesota by ICE cannot stand. What we are witnessing is the storming of the state by the federal government," end quote. Since December, Donald Trump has surged federal agents to the Twin Cities under the guise of immigration enforcement. Thousands of ICE and Border Patrol agents have put the safety of residents in jeopardy, with escalating arrests and violations of fundamental constitutional rights that protect individuals from unreasonable seizures and searches without a warrant, and protect due process for everyone, citizen and non-citizen, without distinction. We are seeing horrifying videos of ICE agents battering down people's doors without a warrant, racially profiling people on the street, busting in car windows and trying to intimidate and suppress the First Amendment rights to peacefully protest. And most visible and clear to the entire nation, the killing of Renee Good, the outright lies from Kristi Noem, Donald Trump, and J.D. Vance about what we saw with our own eyes, and the subsequent attempt to assassinate the character of Renee Good and her widow, all while blocking any fair, independent investigation of the ICE officer who shot her. Instead of making us safer, Trump is deliberately escalating tensions in a city where crime rates have been declining, and the tactics are only accelerating. Renee Good's killing was the 9th reported ICE shooting since September. Meanwhile, in the single year since Donald Trump entered office, 35 people have been reported by ICE to have died in ICE detention facilities. That is the highest number in 2 decades. Let me be clear. This pattern of reckless, even lethal use of force cannot continue, and we will do everything in our power to hold the administration accountable and stop this lawlessness. Let me also be clear about something else. What is happening in Minnesota is a pattern that is dangerous to every single person in America. Because if they can erode the rights of some, they can do it to you. No one is safe. As one of only 24 naturalized citizens to serve in Congress today, someone who spent 17 years in the process to get my US citizenship, this is very personal to me. Never in a million years would I have thought that I would see what I see on the streets of the United States of America. We cannot have a second tier of citizenship. We cannot undermine the contributions of immigrants from all over the world, and we must protect our democracy and our Constitution for all residents and our future generations. I'm grateful to our witnesses for being here today, and I now recognize Representative Ilhan Omar for 4 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you all for being here today. I want to thank Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal for co-hosting this field hearing to raise the alarm about Donald Trump's unlawful, aggressive, and authoritarian actions in the Twin Cities. I also want to thank my colleagues who came from across the country and testifiers for joining us here in Minnesota. What we are witnessing right now is unprecedented. There is no modern precedent for this level of federal overreach, violence, lawlessness carried out in the name of immigration enforcement. This is not routine enforcement. This is not about public safety. This is not even about immigration. This is about political retribution. The president said it himself this week. It is increasingly clear that the entire purpose of these actions is to provoke chaos and fear in order to justify invoking the Insurrection Act and expand the president's ability to rain terror upon American cities who do not vote for him. That is the context in which Renee Nicole Good occurred. This administration has unleashed primarily paramilitary force into our neighborhoods, terrorizing families, escalating enforcement, and now killing a US citizen in our state. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Our office has received numerous reports of deeply questionable arrests, individuals detained without explanation, without warrants, without access to counsel, and in many cases without any discernible lawful basis at all. We have heard of agents pushing people because they look Latino or Somali, forcing them into car accidents where they smash windows, cut seatbelts, carry people away. Abandoned cars with broken windows have become a normal sight of daily life in the Twin Cities. Trump claims Operation Metro Surge is about targeting criminals. The reality is even more disturbing. They have deliberately blurred the lines between public safety threats, legal immigration, and US citizens, creating an enforcement campaign so indiscriminate that citizens are being swept up, arrested, and carried away to detention facilities. In Minnesota, dozens of US citizens have been taken into custody and released hours later. We have yet to see charges materialize because in nearly all instances, no federal charges are possible. Similarly, this administration has worked to reduce any semblance of due process, sending people out of state, specifically to prevent access to legal representation, separating them from their family, counsel, and open removal processes for refugees with no legitimate legal basis. This is the behavior of paramilitary force operating outside the bounds of law. This administration has been entirely unresponsive. Families cannot locate loved ones, attorneys cannot find their clients, members of Congress can't get answers about where people are being held. In North Minneapolis, doors have been battered down without judicial warrants, as ICE has conducted door-to-door operations with guns drawn, actions that are neither legal or precedented. People have been indiscriminately shoved in the streets, pushed into oncoming traffic, and nearly hit by buses. Flashbangs, pepper balls, and chemical irritants are used without a second thought. This is not the America we want. This is not the Minnesota we deserve, and we will fight back. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses.
Thank you, Representative Omar. I now recognize Representative Betty McCollum for 3 minutes for an opening statement.
To my colleagues, I want to give you all a very warm welcome here in Minnesota. Today you're going to hear what's been happening in our state. The Trump administration is abusing its power of the federal government to deny people their civil rights and subjecting them to violence. And the killing of Renee Good by an ICE agent is an example. Minnesotans are being racially profiled on a mass level. We are being assaulted in our streets. They are being kidnapped from our communities. Parents are seized in front of their children by masked federal agents. High school students have been thrown to the ground and pepper sprayed on their own school grounds. And it's happening right here, right now. ICE and the Department of Homeland Security must suspend all their actions at once to stop the chaos and the physical danger. The actions of these agents, which are totally unprofessional and illegal, create great harm and fear. Sunday, I saw the fear in young children's eyes and their mothers at a Midway Target when ICE pulled into the parking lot. 1 hour later, I watched as ICE agents drove through the Menards parking lot. Because there was no place to stage, they left. Our neighbors were yelling at them, some things I won't mention in public, but my favorite part was keep on driving, keep driving right out of Minnesota. Clearly what I saw was not normal or right. Secretary Noem, you better be preserving your documents unaltered because you are going to be held to testify and you will be subpoenaed. President Trump, stop stoking the chaos in our neighborhoods. You are creating a dangerous escalation. Now, Minnesota, we're not taking the bait. To my fellow Americans in other states, these actions left unchallenged could mean you're next. Right. People that you live alongside with will be denied their rights and their due process. Today you will hear the truth of what's happening in Minnesota. Minnesotans continue to be peaceful in your protest in the face of violence. Yes, in the face of violence. And keep on recording the actions of these federal agents, but do it safely. As we celebrate 250 years of the American experience, in the words of Benjamin Franklin after the Constitutional Convention, he said, "We have a republic if you can keep it." Mr. Franklin was right. Self-governance is within all of us. I thank you, Pramila, I should be so informal, I'm sorry, and the committee for being here and gathering an amazing group of people that I heard from last night. Folks, be safe out there, but stand up for your rights because they're my rights too. I yield back.
Thank you so much, Representative McCollum. We're very fortunate to have with us both senators from the state of Minnesota. I now recognize Senator Amy Klobuchar for 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Good morning, everyone. We are gathered today because our state is once again the center of America's heartbreak. And thank you so much, Congressman Jayapal and Omar, that you brought us together, that we have people from all over the country to stand with us. And I want to thank our incredible leaders, the two mayors, as well as Attorney General Ellison, who's been at the forefront of these legal fights. I need to get off our streets. They are causing confusion, chaos, and fear. They are literally chasing DoorDash delivery people into private homes where there are children. They are chasing down legal citizens in parking lots and wrestling them down, as the Congresswoman just noted, in front of Menards and in Targets. But instead of de-escalating the situation, the administration has doubled down. People are saying, look at my passport, look at my passport. Legal workers at our airport, Native Americans are being targeted on the way to their jobs. I recently met with principals in city and suburban schools in Minnesota, and they told me the horror stories of little kids scared teachers being wrestled down in front of them in their school parking lot, graduates being stopped. And now the administration has chosen to send even more ICE officers, to the point now where there are nearly 3,000 of them, which is significantly more than the 1,100 sworn officers in Minneapolis and St. Paul combined, and equal to these sworn officers in 10 metropolitan police departments. This is completely, as the mayors know, out of balance, and it is chaos. We are telling our people who are so offended for their neighbors and are standing up, not just in organized protests, but are just standing up when they see it happen in stores. We are telling them to be peaceful and not to take the bait from the threats coming out of the White House, because in the end, these people would not be here from all over the country if they didn't believe that democracy will prevail, that the rule of law will prevail. But this is who we are in Minnesota. We are the people that slide down icy hills to get to a protest. We are the people that quietly and loudly come together to help our neighbors. We are the people, in the words of Renee Good's wife, Becca, lost the love of her life, a mom of 3, who said that we must reject hate and embrace compassion. So that is what I hope our representatives will pick up from their time in Minnesota and from our incredible witnesses today, that we're standing together, regardless, Democrats, Republicans, even though some people are louder than another. People know that this invasion is not what our state is about, and we're going to stand up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Now I recognize Senator Tina Smith for 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you all so much for being here. I want to add my thanks to members of Congress who have made this trip to Minnesota to stand in solidarity with all of us, and also to the incredible local leaders with my fellow members of the Minnesota congressional delegation, local leaders, the mayors here today, many state legislators that are in the audience. And particularly, I want to thank the activists and organizers and community leaders that are in the audience, who are doing the work of keeping our communities as safe as we can. President Trump's illegal deportation campaign is leaving Minnesotans and Americans detained, arrested, injured, and killed, all the while trampling on our basic civil rights and due process. It is making us all less safe, it is dangerous, and it must stop. Renee Good, a United States citizen, a wife and a mother, was shot and killed by federal agents in broad daylight in the middle of a Minneapolis street. The federal government, within hours, labeled her as a domestic terrorist before they even knew her name, and are clearly attempting to cover up what happened. And in Minnesota today, people are literally calling 911 because they need protection from federal agents that are threatening their safety and their security. ICE agents are blatantly profiling Black and brown and Asian people and Native Americans. And this is happening not just in Minneapolis and St. Paul, but in suburbs and small towns and communities all over Minnesota. Now, many of these agents are clearly poorly trained, which puts us all in danger, but they are also hostile and emboldened because they have been told, starting with the vice president, that they have 100% immunity. And as a result, people are getting hurt and even killed. And of course, just yesterday, the president literally threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, which amounts to declaring war on the state of Minnesota. I am so grateful to all of you here today who are going to help us tell this story, not only to Minnesota, but to the country, because we know that most Americans do not support this blatant illegal activity. And the more they hear about what is happening, the more they will add their voices to the powerful resistance that we are seeing here in Minnesota. And that is the way that we will win this important fight. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Senator Smith. We are fortunate to be joined with 2 members of our House Democratic leadership. Ted Lieu, the Vice Chair of the House Democratic Caucus, is here, and I now recognize House Democratic Caucus Whip, Catherine Clark, for an opening statement for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, and I am so pleased to be here. So pleased to be here. Thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal, for bringing us together today. And thank you to Congresswoman Omar and McCollum for hosting us in the Twin Cities. To Mayor Hur and to Attorney General Ellison and all of the witnesses. Thank you for taking the time to be here while your community and state is under siege and weighed down by injustice. The sheer number of colleagues that we have in attendance underscores how deeply the pain of Minnesota is felt across the entire country. And it reflects what the American people understand about this moment, that if this terror can be on the people of Minnesota, it can be directed on any of us. If the sovereignty of this state, its local police and prosecutors can be threatened by the untrained recruits that Kristi Noem has fashioned into a mass paramilitary force, then none of us have true security. And if the shooting of Renee Good can be deemed justified without investigation, then we know all of our freedom is threatened. I want to thank the people of Minnesota for their resolve and grit, for their courage, and for turning towards each other in love instead of turning away in fear. You are setting a model for how we respond with strength and community. And to our witnesses, we thank you for speaking out and sharing your stories. Your courage inspires us, and we will be taking your voices to all of our work that lies ahead in these perilous days. Thank you again, Congresswoman, for pulling us together and for being here. I am so grateful to be part of this important and urgent discussion, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Whip Clark. For those of you who are looking to use Wi-Fi, you can use Ledge Public Wi-Fi, and there's no password. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's witnesses for our first panel. Keith Ellison was sworn in as Minnesota's 30th Attorney General on January 7th, 2019. As the people's lawyer, Attorney General Ellison's job is to help Minnesotans afford their lives and live with dignity, safety, and respect. From 2007 to 2019, Attorney General Ellison represented Minnesota's 5th Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives and served as a dear friend and colleague for many of us on this dais. Prior to Congress, Attorney General Ellison served 4 years in the Minnesota House of Representatives, as well as spending 16 years as an attorney specializing in civil rights and defense law. He received his law degree from the University of Minnesota Law School in 1990 and is the proud father of 4 adult children. Jacob Frey has served as mayor of Minneapolis since 2018, being re-elected twice in 2021 and 2025. A member of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party, he served on the Minneapolis City Council representing Ward 3 from 2014 to 2018. Prior to entering elected office, Mayor Frey worked as an employment and civil rights attorney and became an active community organizer. He also became involved in advocacy for those experiencing homelessness, helping tenants who lost their homes in North Minneapolis. Mayor Frey received his undergraduate degree from William & Mary and law degree from Villanova University. Kali Hur was sworn in as the 56th mayor of St. Paul earlier this year. She is the first woman, the first Asian American, and the first Hmong American to hold this position. Prior to being elected mayor, she served in the Minnesota House of Representatives from 2019 to 2025. Mayor Hur was born in the mountains of Laos and came to the United States as a refugee at the age of 3. A strong work ethic, her family's tenacity, and support from her community propelled Mayor Hur to the highest levels of our state government and now to City Hall, where she brings her years of lived experience across different sectors to help move St. Paul forward. I thank you all for your leadership in these incredibly difficult times and for being here today. We ask that you summarize your testimony in 4 minutes. To help you stay within that time, there is a timer here to keep track. Attorney General Ellison, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Jayapal, and words simply cannot embrace and capture how grateful we are for all of you to be here, to bear witness and to be present to what is happening in our beloved state of Minnesota right now. Your presence here is incredibly important and impactful, shining a light on what is the single most unjust thing I've ever seen happen to our state of Minnesota. The Trump administration's decision to target Minnesota and the Twin Cities, flooding our streets with thousands of federal immigration agents, is not about public safety. It's not about fraud. It's not even about immigration enforcement. It is because, in the words of Donald Trump, he believes that he won our state 3 times, but he did not win it in the election. I'm quoting him. He's the one who said these words, not me. In fact, when he said what he said, it was so incredible that I had to replay it a few times to make sure that I heard that this was about vindictiveness and an election loss, not anything to do with any legitimate public interest. And you've heard already from the very accurate descriptions from our congressional presenters that we've seen attacks on high schools, over 3,000 agent surge, warrantless searches, killings, shootings, and none of this has done anything to help Minnesota. In fact, it has hurt Minnesota. In fact, it has diminished economic activity in our state, deprived schools, children from education, created barriers for public life, and has expanded costs on our state. You'll hear from both of our mayors how both of them are dealing with increased costs for overtime. I'll leave that to them to describe. But that is why the 3 of us joined together with the state of Minnesota, Minneapolis, and St. Paul to sue the Trump administration over Operation Metro Surge. Let me be clear. We're not suing because ICE is in Minnesota. They were in Minnesota last year. They were in Minnesota 10 years ago. We didn't sue them then. We sued them over this activity, which is unjustified, unconstitutional, damages our state, interferes with our sovereignty as a member of these United States, violates the Administrative Procedures Act, is arbitrary, capricious, and damaging to all of us. That is what this lawsuit is all about. And I just want to note that you've heard much about how the behavior of ISIS is taxing our local law enforcement. But I want to be clear, local law enforcement is doing a good job. They're maintaining order in our state. The order, to the degree there is a lack of it or a challenge, is directly and exclusively because of the Metro Surge authorized by the President of the United States. And so as he contemplates the Insurrection Act, please know that we do not need federal authorities to help us maintain order. We need them to stop doing things. That is what is needed in this situation, and that is what we're demanding in our lawsuit. So let me just say that the family of Renee Nicole Good and the family of everyone who's been thrown to the ground, beaten, harassed, arrested in a warrantless search, anyone whose business has been destroyed, had to face closing their business because of this conduct, that we are standing with you. And we will not stand by idly as this injustice unfolds. We will stand up and assert all means legal to protect the people of our state. I will yield back.
Thank you, Attorney General. Mayor Fry, you may begin for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Ranking Member Jayapal, Congresswoman Omar, members of this committee. We are so grateful to have you here today. Our ask is that you take the things that you have seen and you have heard from Minnesota, you bring them back to your respective districts. You talk to your colleagues that are here with us. You talk to both Democrats and Republicans about the unconstitutional violations that are happening in Minnesota and Minneapolis. And we put a stop to this because what we're seeing on our streets is unnecessary abuses of force. This is an invasion for the sake of creating chaos by our own federal government to interrupt the daily lives of tens of thousands of people. As the Attorney General said, this is not about safety. This is not about immigration. This is about sowing chaos on the streets of Minneapolis. This is about political retribution. And we in Minneapolis are suffering the brunt of it right now. Let me tell you what that looks like. It looks like businesses closing. It looks like people on the streets that are terrified to get picked up. It looks like United States citizens getting taken somewhere where they don't know where they are going nor when they are going to return to their families. It's families torn apart. It's schools closing. It's an unnecessary expense of taxpayer dollars just to try to keep order. If this were about order, there would be a simple way to restore it. And let me tell you a secret. It's not restored by additional federal agents. Order would be restored, and I will make this prediction, if those federal agents left. As soon as they leave, we will have peace, we will have safety, and order will be restored. Before the federal agents came here, our city was experiencing a brilliant comeback. Indeed, we were on the way to a renaissance. Safety had been improved, crime was down in virtually every category, in virtually every neighborhood. Thus far in 2026, last I checked, we had only had 4 shootings. 2 of them were ICE. An entire city of 435,000 people, 4 shootings, and 2 of them were ICE. It is clear that the practices that ICE is using is unconstitutional. They are not methodical. They are not well planned out. They have taken people out of their cars to detain them on major streets, left the car running, not in park. Car rolls down the streets. You don't need to be a genius to figure out that that is not safe. We've had small children that have been damaged by the inhalation of some form of gas. We've had loose dogs that were left unattended in the streets after ICE arrested and drove away with its owner. This is not making Minneapolis safer. This is not about safety. And I think the main message here is this is not sustainable. We have had tens of thousands of people in our city beautifully stand up for one another. They've showed this entire country who we are, how you love your neighbor, how you make a commitment to the greater good in society. And we have seen consistent unconstitutional practice by ICE discriminating only on the basis of are you Latino, are you Somali, and then indiscriminate pickups thereafter. People are walking around on the street with their passports. That's not American. That's the furthest thing from it. Please take back to your respective constituencies and your colleagues the message of if you love your own community, do not let this happen in ours.
Thank you, Mayor Fry. Mayor Herr, you're recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you. Friends, neighbors, and members of the United States Senate and House, welcome to our capital city, St. Paul, where we are a big city but a small community. I sit before you today, a newly sworn-in mayor of a city under siege by the federal government. Right now, federal law enforcement officers far outnumber local law enforcement officers in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The tragic effect of this occupation are rippling far and wide throughout our communities. Beyond the immediate and tragic human toll of rounding up our residents based on what they look and sound like, the economic impacts on our city are far-reaching and likely unquantifiable in the near term. St. Paul Public Schools need to close so that they can offer remote learning for students so that they can feel safe in their learning. We've received reports of federal law enforcement officers going door to door asking people where the Asian people live, right in our very own city. I myself have received advice to carry my passport with me because that they may try to target me based on what I look like as well. Our immigrant, refugee, and communities of color are hurting. I've been meeting with immigrant business owners to develop plans to throw them a lifeline and help them stay afloat. I've heard from them that some of their sales have dropped 60% if they're even able to stay open at all. They are relying on community networks and volunteers to secure their entrances and monitor their parking lots. It is draining their resources and ours. Our law enforcement officers are responding to incidents across our city in which residents are feeling threatened and having their rights violated. Car accidents caused by ICE agents, leaving physical injuries and hazards on our roadways. They have fired shots in our streets, and we've heard from citizens who were held in detention centers in a U.S. citizen section. Our residents are scared and confused by the number of agents in uniforms bearing the words police that do not behave or treat residents the way St. Paul police officers do. It is undermining the trust within our officers. If this were about safety, federal agents would be going after people who are truly a threat to our community. Instead, they are casting a wide net, scooping up residents who enrich our community, contribute to our economy, and make up the fabric of our cities and state, producing vibrancy for our communities. We are ground zero for Trump's war in America, a war on our democracy, on our freedoms, on our rights as Americans. It is in our backyard today, and it is only a matter of time before it is in yours. As congressional colleagues at the highest level of our federal government, we need you to act, to speak out, to elevate stories of what is happening to our residents. I was with my parents last night for an hour talking to them, and they told me they hadn't opened their blinds in days. They were afraid that their neighbors would tell them that that house was an Asian house. That my parents have both moved all of their hospital visits, their doctor's visits to remote or to virtual because they're afraid to leave their home. That is the America that we are living in right now, where people cannot access food, they cannot access healthcare, they cannot access their basic needs because of the terror, because our cities are under siege. We need your help, whatever it may be. We are standing united and strong, but we need immediate relief for our cities. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for lifting up what is happening in our city and our state. I yield back my time.
Thank you so much, Mayor Herr, and thank you all for your incredible strength and leadership. We appreciate you being here, and we'll excuse you to go back to all the things I know are before you. I'd now like to invite up the witnesses for the second panel. I now recognize Representative Omar to introduce our second panel of witnesses.
Thank you so much to our first panel. It is my pleasure to introduce today's witnesses for the second panel. Deependi Singh Mayal has been the executive director of the ACLU Minnesota for the last 4 years. Prior to that, he served as the executive director of the James Binger Center for New Americans at the University of Minnesota Law School. Prior to that, he served as the director of the Refugee and Immigration Program at the Advocates for Human Rights in Minneapolis, where he directed the organization's legal services program that provided representation to asylum seekers at all levels of litigation, including before the Supreme Court. Mr. Mayal led its National Assembly project, which supported pro bono attorneys representing asylum seekers throughout the United States. A graduate of the Brooklyn Law School, Mayor has spent his career working for vulnerable populations. Patty is a 26-year-old U.S. citizen who has lived in South Minneapolis for 14 years, originally from St. Louis Park, Minnesota, who's here today to testify about her experience of being forcefully taken by ICE and what she had witnessed inside the Bishop Henry Whipple Federal Building, where Minnesotans are being held in dehumanizing conditions. Mubashir is a resident of Minneapolis and a U.S. citizen whose family came to the United States as refugees, and he grew up in this country. He works as a manager at a mental health services provider in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood of Minneapolis. He's here today to describe his interactions with the Department of Homeland Security. Amelia Gonzalez Avalos is an immigrant from Mexico City, raised in Minnesota. She leads Unidos Minnesota, where she helped grow a small student collective into the state's largest multi-racial, multi-generational, women-led BIPOC majority organization in the state. Unidos Minnesota builds power across race, income, age, and zip codes, cultivating leadership, belonging, and agencies. Unidos Minnesota drives people-powered policy agenda, shifts culture, and creates durable community power that delivers tangible improvements for working families across Minnesota. Jaylani Hussein is the executive director of the Minnesota chapter of Council on American Islamic Relations, where he has worked for the last 11 years. Mr. Hussein works to challenge Islamophobia, address racial and social inequalities in the state of Minnesota. Since the killing of George Floyd and before, he has worked on addressing both federal and local law enforcement accountability. Hussein's family immigrated from Somalia to Minnesota in 1993, probably one of the first families to arrive, and is trilingual in English, Somali, and Arabic. Mr. Hussein holds degrees in community development and city planning from St. Cloud State University and political science degree from North Dakota State University. Chief Kelly McCarthy was appointed chief of the Mendota Heights Police Department in 2017. Prior to her employment in Mendota Heights, Chief McCarthy has worked for Lino Lakes Police Department. She has worked in various law enforcement roles, including as a community service officer, training officer, and deputy director of public service. Chief McCarthy has a master's degree in leadership and education from the University of St. Thomas, and is a graduate of Harvard Kennedy School, where she studied applying behavioral insights to the design of public policy and leadership decision-making. She's a graduate of the 235th session of the FBI National Academy and was appointed chair of the Peace Office Standards and Training Board by Governor Walz and served from 2019 to 2023.
Thank you, Representative Omar. We welcome all of our distinguished witnesses for panel 2, and we thank you for participating in today's hearing. We ask that you summarize your testimony in 4 minutes to help you stay within that time. There is a timer to help you keep track. Mr. Mayo, you may begin.
Thank you, Ranking Member Jayapal and distinguished members of Congress. Thank you for holding today's hearing. My name is Deepinder Mayo, and I am honored to serve as the Executive Director of the ACLU in Minnesota. You visit our beautiful city in a time of profound grief, fear, and outrage. In recent weeks, we have experienced violence, chaos, and abuse at the hands of hundreds and now thousands of masked agents brandishing weapons of war in American streets. Today, I will share with you about 2 recent ACLU of Minnesota lawsuits that document these profound harms and the administration's brazen violation of our laws. And first, I want to tell you a bit more about what we are experiencing. Agents have stormed our parks and schoolyards, blocked our streets, barricaded store parking lots, and thrown tear gas in front of our homes and schools. While many Minnesotans are peacefully protesting, many others are afraid to leave their homes. Public schools in Minneapolis closed earlier this month after federal agents pepper sprayed, tackled, and handcuffed multiple people at a high school. More than 30% of students were absent from classes this week. Parts of our city are like a ghost town, as the very presence of federal agents make them terrified to go about their daily life, and many immigrant neighbors have not left their homes in days, avoiding basic activities like buying groceries, picking up prescriptions, or going to work. These federal agents swore an oath to our Constitution, yet they have broken dozens of our laws. As we documented in our lawsuit filed yesterday, Hussein versus Noam, mass federal agents are violently stopping and arresting countless people based on nothing more than their race and perceived ethnicity in violation of the Fourth Amendment and federal law. In Minnesota, the overwhelming majority of Somali, Latino, and Hmong individuals are U.S. citizens, including 95% of Somali Minnesotans. We also have a large Native American population that is being unfairly targeted. Because of the dragnet tactics, American citizens are being swept up and wrongfully arrested. One such citizen is Mubashir Khalif Hussein, who you will hear from shortly. When he was walking to lunch, when an unmarked SUV approached him, a man wearing a ski mask and a police vest who refused to identify himself pushed him into a restaurant. And despite being presented with clear documentation of his citizenship, federal agents took him into custody and forced him to submit to a face scan. In recent weeks, ordinary Minnesotans have banded together to bear witness and peacefully protest. And in response, we have seen an unprecedented attack on dissent, which we documented in our lawsuit in December 2025, Tincher versus Noam. Federal agents have abducted U.S. citizens, held them incommunicado for hours, pepper sprayed and aimed assault rifles at protesters and observers, and even followed observers home to scare them. Our plaintiff in that case is Sue Tincher. She was observing agents and only asked, "Are you ICE?" She was forced to the ground, handcuffed, taken to a federal building, had some of her clothes cut off and her wedding ring cut off, shackled and left in a cell for hours, then released without charge. This is happening across the country and not just in Minnesota. The First Amendment demands better. Those were the words of a federal district court judge in Southern California. And while we fight for our rights in court, we also need help from members of Congress. The president was able to secure $170 billion in funding from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and that has enabled ICE to become what it is today, a dangerous agency acting without impunity. As they abuse our communities, they continue to ask for more funding, and we need you to act. We need you to use the power of the purse to demand an end to the Trump administration's unprecedented, lawless, and dangerous escalation in our community. And we urge that you demand federal forces to withdraw from Minnesota before another life is taken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayo. Ms. Patty, you're recognized.
Just quickly before I start my testimony, I just wanted to clarify that in my bio it said I'm 26, and while I wish I was still 26, I am now 36.
I meant to say 36.
That's okay. So thank you, Madam Chair and community members. This past Sunday, January 11th, my friend Brandon Seguenza and I responded to reports of 2 ICE vehicles cornering and pepper spraying the car of an observer in my neighborhood. We are both U.S. citizens. We decided to go there because we'd heard that the more eyes on ICE agents, the less likely they are to escalate to violence. When we got there, the ICE agents were getting back into their 2 vehicles. They turned down a side street and we followed them for about 40 seconds, blowing our whistles and honking our horns, the few ways we've been able to successfully warn people that ICE is in the neighborhood. Halfway down the block, ICE stopped, got out, and surrounded the vehicle, yelling at us to stop following them. On their way back to their vehicles, one of the agents turned around and decided to come back and pepper spray into the vents near my front windshield, which immediately started burning our eyes and throats. When we didn't turn around, they came back again, and without asking us to get out of the car, smashed both of the front windows, dragged us out, and arrested us. We were released without charges 9 hours later. Brandon and I were transported separately. I was put in a car with 3 agents and no other civilians. As soon as the agents got into the car and shut the doors, they immediately started taunting and mocking me. One agent took a photo of me on a cell phone and showed it to the other 2, laughing. Another made demeaning comments about my appearance. About 2 minutes into the ride, one agent said, quote, "You guys gotta stop obstructing us. That's why this lesbian bitch is dead." Speaking of Renee Good, which filled me with rage and sadness. How could you say that? And then I remembered that cruelty and humiliation were probably the point. When we got to the Whipple Federal Building, I immediately saw Hispanic and East African people lined up against a wall, about to be put into holding cells. I was escorted into the building and led to a room where they put me in ankle shackles. I was then taken to a hallway with cells designated for U.S. citizens and was held there for over 8 hours. While I was there, I was never given a phone call, despite asking at least 4 times. My friend and I in adjacent cells had to beg for water and to go to the bathroom. The bathrooms were in different holding cells, often with other people in them, with only a 3-foot panel in front of the toilet to cover people's bottom halves. While being escorted to the bathroom and to questioning, I saw holding cells with over a dozen people each and a large holding cell of between 40 to 50 people. Most of the people there were Hispanic and East African, both women and men. Some cells had no room for people to sit or lay down. Most people I saw were staring straight ahead, not talking, despondent and grief-stricken, and I know I'll never forget their faces. When I was inside my cell, I heard wailing, screaming, crying, begging, and pleading from women, men, and children. Alongside that visceral anguish was the small talk, banter, and laughter from the federal agents outside our cells, clearly desensitized to the deep and audible pain right in front of their eyes. It's worth mentioning that 2 other people in my cell with me that day were Marine Corps veterans, brave women who said they had gotten arrested for the same reason they wanted to join the Marines, to protect their fellow countrymen. One of them had cuts, scrapes, a swollen wrist, and a twisted ankle from being brutally handled during her arrest. She said she couldn't believe that the first time a gun was turned on her was by her own government. I was made to feel scared and humiliated throughout the arrest process. At the detention center, I was made to feel intimidated and as though my constitutional rights and biological needs didn't matter. After all that, I was released without charges, which makes it clear to me that this is more of a campaign to spread fear and terror than it is to enforce the law. The people of Minneapolis are collateral damage to the Trump administration's political theater, a campaign to paint Black and brown people and liberals as villains, to distract from an unprecedented reign of corruption and criminality at the executive level, while at the same time making it clear to all of us, even U.S. citizens, that this administration does not and will not honor the basic constitutional rights to which we are all entitled. I've never felt more afraid in my 14 years of living in this city than I have this past month, with ICE running rampant and killing one of my neighbors. I ask for you to do everything in your power to stop this campaign of terror so we can return to a sense of safety and normalcy. I'm lucky to be back at home with my loved ones and that I can return to my job and my community. Renee Good's family never gets to see her again. The 100 or so people I saw in that facility don't get to come home, and that is unconscionable.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pally. Mr. Mubashir, you're recognized for 4 minutes.
Ranking Member Jayapal and distinguished members of Congress, thank you for the invitation to testify before you today. My name is Mubashir Khalil Hussain. I am a 20-year-old U.S. citizen. My family is Somali, and when I was 6 or 7 years old, my family arrived in the United States as refugees from Ethiopia. 8 months after arriving in the United States, we moved to Minnesota. I became a naturalized citizen in 2019 along with my parents and my siblings. But my citizenship did not protect me from being physically detained and hurt by ICE agents. On December 10, 2025, I was at work in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood. Around 1 p.m., I heard a commotion and what sounded like whistles and horns. When I looked out the window, I saw what I assumed were ICE agents on the street. I did not want to be confronted by ICE, so I waited 20 or 30 minutes until the sounds died down before taking my lunch break. As I entered the building, I paused to speak with someone on the street about what had happened earlier. That was when I noticed an unmarked 10 SUV approaching us. A man wearing a ski mask and a police-style vest entered the vehicle and quickly walked towards me. The man did not say stop or identify himself. I turned to walk away, hoping he would leave me alone. The man quickened his pace, grabbed me forcefully and pushed me into a restaurant and asked, "Why are you running from me?" I was not running. I was just walking away because I did not want to talk to him. I knew that ICE agents had been targeting people that looked like me. I immediately started repeating over and over again, "I'm a citizen, I'm a citizen, I'm a citizen." But the agent did not stop to look at my ID. A second ICE agent entered the restaurant. Together they dragged me outside and put me into a headlock on the ground. I repeated, "I'm a citizen, I have an ID." The agent kept saying, "That don't matter, that don't matter." They put me in the back of an SUV. While I was sitting in the back of the SUV, my boss came out with a copy of my passport card. He held the paper on the agent's windshield, but the officers ignored him and refused to take the documents into account. They eventually drove me one street over before parking and told me they had to scan my face. I was terrified of what they were going to do a picture of me, and I did not trust them. I would not let them take a picture of me. The officer also kept telling me that they were going to take me in if I did not let them scan my face. One of the officers pulled out his phone and threatened to push a button and call for transfer. At that point, there were 3 ICE agents with me in the car. My back hurt from when I was put in a headlock on the ground, and the handcuffs were extremely tight on my wrist. Each time I asked the agent, "Can you please loosen the handcuffs?" he would squeeze my hands. When I asked for medical attention for my back and my wrist, the original ICE agent told me there was going to be medical assistance at the facility. After about half an hour, the ICE agent drove me to their office near Fort Snelling. When we arrived, they forced me to take the face scan. When we got into the building, the agents took the handcuffs off me and put shackles on my ankles before searching me. I asked for water, they said no. Then an employee told me I was being deported. I again insisted I was a citizen and that I could show proof of it on my phone. I showed a picture of my passport card to a woman at the ICE office. She took a picture of my passport card and then searched for my name in the criminal database. Eventually she said, "Kick him out." It is difficult to believe that this happened to me. I knew that the president had made statements about Somali people and that there would be additional ICE officers in the Twin Cities focused on Somali people. But I did not think that this would happen to me, someone in my family. We are all United States citizens, so we should not be at risk of being jailed or deported by ICE. In the neighborhood in which I work, I hear screaming all the time. Coming from encounters with federal immigration agents, I also hear whistles and honking all the time. When I hear these things, my heart starts beating really fast and I can't breathe. It brings me back to what I went through, and it almost feels like it's happening to me again. It is terrifying right now, wherever I go. I am here today because what happened to me is wrong. The targeting, harassing, violence, and detention of Somali Americans is wrong. And I am worried for the safety of me, my family, and my neighbors and community. If Congress does not act, we will continue to be harmed simply for living in the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mubashir. Ms. Gonzalez-Alamos, you're recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Jayapal and members of Congress. My name is Emilia Gonzalez-Avalos. I'm Executive Director of Unidos, Minnesota. I am here today because our communities are experiencing a human rights and constitutional crisis as a result of Operation Surge and the historic mass deployment of federal immigration officers across Minnesota. I want to speak about Unidos Project Monarca, a coalition of thousands of workers, students, people of faith, parents, clergy, business owners, teachers, caregivers, and young people who have trained over 26,000 everyday Minnesotans as neighborhood observers to help people protect rights where it matters the most, on the ground and in our communities. This work is called constitutional observing. It's peaceful, lawful act of witnessing government activity and ensuring constitutional rights are respected in real time, documented interactions, de-escalating and providing transparency where power is being exercised against everyday people. Our protection is our power. We stand for the fundamental freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution: free speech, peaceful protest, and protection for unreasonable searches and seizures. These rights are the backbone of a healthy democracy. They are about dignity, privacy, and safety in our own neighborhoods. We, Minnesotans, are keeping us safe. We are the light. Since the Operation Metro Surge began, our phones have not stopped ringing. This administration continues to argue that these operations target so-called criminals who are a burden to social systems. Yet the reality on the ground tells a different story. Federal agents continue to target workplaces and small businesses, the very places where people contribute to our economy, support their families, and sustain local communities. This administration claims this surge brings security and safety, but at the same time, federal officers are operating around hospitals, schools, and places of worship, spaces that should be protected, not militarized. These actions create fear, disrupt possession services, and send shockwaves far beyond a single arrest. These ripple effects are felt across entire communities and across the state of Minnesota, undermining trust, stability, and public safety itself. We get calls from families whose relatives are predominantly workers with no criminal convictions, were picked up on their way to work while dropping children off to school or simply taking out the trash. We get calls from parents who spend hours waiting for their spouse to come home, only to realize something is wrong and they don't know where to turn. We hear from families and attorneys who have searched for hours for their loved ones. We hear how children as young as 4 years old have been detained and how families are unable to find them in the federal tracking system for hours and days at a time. We hear warehouses in Minnesota suburbs where people are questioned and processed in the dark without transparency and without clear access to legal counsel. Not only that, the ACLU enforcement complaint form has become the most shared resource among our operators and constitutional observers. It is shared because people are witnessing violations they believe must be documented and reported. As this operation intensifies, so have attacks of those who are simply watching. Trained observers, peaceful, identifiable, and acting within the law have been followed, ordered to stop filming, pushed off sidewalks and roads, violently treated, and threatened with arrest. Some have been violently detained for doing nothing more than exercising their First Amendment rights. When the government treats observers as interference, when witnesses are intimidated, and when cameras are treated as threats, constitutional erosion is no longer theoretical. It is happening in real time. On January 7, 2026, an ICE agent shot and killed our neighbor, 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good, a U.S. citizen and a Minneapolis resident, a moment that sparked grief, outrage, and widespread protest. This tragic death underscores the deep distrust many Minnesotans feel towards federal enforcement apparatus, because people should not have to worry that an encounter with a masked, armed federal agent could cost them their lives. This is not about whether immigration law exists. This is about how power is exercised.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gonzalez-Avalos.
Can I wrap up?
Go ahead. If you can make it really fast, please.
I promise I'm wrapping up. The scale and tactics of Operation Metro Surge have destabilized neighborhoods, separated families, undermined local authorities, and eroded public trust. Communities are not safer, and Minnesota should not be a testing ground for unchecked federal force. I offer this testimony with the awareness of the risk of federal retaliation to myself, my family, our members, and constitutional observers in our workplace, precisely because we have chosen to bring this information into the public record and to exercise the First Amendment rights that are fundamental to our democracy. We need ICE out of Minnesota until our constitutional compliance, transparency, and accountability are restored. Congress must reassert its oversight role, freeze their funds, help prosecute Agent Ross and all agents acting outside the law, and make clear that enforcement goals never justify the suspension of constitutional rights. Our democracy depends on a high-functioning civilian participation and the rule of law, and the rule of law depends on accountability to power. Thank you very much, Chair Jayapal.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez-Alvarez. Appreciate you. Mr. Hussein, you're recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal. To the members who are here today visiting us and standing with us, I want to just say deeply thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for choosing to stand with us. And thank you for bringing the spirit, the warmth of your districts with us today. I'm a proud Somali American. I appear before you today not just as a civil rights advocate, but as a witness. I'm here to testify to a sustained pattern of organized disinformation and targeted harassment against the Somali American community. What I'm describing is a familiar American story. It has been updated to the digital age, but it remains rooted in long-standing systemic racial fear. Since 2025 election, we have witnessed and documented an organized, coordinated hate targeting Somali Americans marked by nearly identical language, appearing across multiple online platforms within a compressed time frame. This activity originated and organized in MAGA online spaces, was designed, manufactured, fear to dehumanize an entire community. President Trump amplified and legitimized those narratives on social media, culminating in Christmas Day statements referring to Somali Americans as garbage. Words from the President of the United States are not symbolic. They authorize behavior. They normalize harassment. They escalate threats. And they lower the barrier to violence. Somali Americans sit in an intersection of multiple marginalized identities. We are Black, we're immigrants, and we're Muslim. As a result, our community has been scapegoated through sweeping narratives that criminalize our entire community based on identity rather than evidence. This reflects a broad institutional pattern that has targeted Black and immigrant communities for generations, from segregation, redlining, surveillance programs, travel bans, and voter suppression. In fact, today, if you look at the travel ban, 24 out of the 54 African nations have a travel restriction. Don't tell me that President Trump does not hate Black people. Targeting our Congresswoman Ilhan Omar had produced measurable consequences not only for her family, but our community. Coinciding with increased attacks against mosques, today Minnesota leads the nation in reported mosque attacks. This escalation is not isolated, it's connected. At the same time, these narratives have been used to expand the federal enforcement against our community in our state. Somali Americans have been living in Minnesota for nearly 30 years. And yes, I was only one of the first ones that came. And the water was just fine in Minnesota, and we told the rest of the people to come down. Our children represent the United States in Olympics. My community, we are health workers, drivers, teachers, laborers, entrepreneurs, engineers, public servants. In fact, at the lowest number that ICE knows, 95% of our community are either lawful residents or U.S. citizens. In fact, 51% of our population are born here. Somali Americans do not belong here because of our economic productivity. We belong here because we are Americans.
That's right.
ICE enforcement targeting our community has been significant. Parents are contacting our office and asking whether it's safe to send their children. Elders are asking and carrying immigration documents simply to go to their mosque to practice their faith. Businesses are closing across our state. Refugees who fled war, who had been vetted, are now being swept in the past few days. This is not about public safety. This is about community destabilization. Former FBI whistleblower Terry Aubrey warned us years ago about institutional bias directing Somali Americans within federal law enforcement here. Those warnings have been ignored. The consequences are now visible. They came for the Somalis, but they got all of us. Today, Renee Good is murdered. She was not a Somali American. She was not an immigrant. But she stood up, she bore the witness, and paid the price. Her death is a warning of the unchecked enforcement of dehumanization that needs to stop. Dr. King warned us, injustice left unchecked spreads. And that is why we are asking all of you today as Congress to act. Do your job. Stand up for the Constitution and the American people. Our lives depend on it. Our nation depends on it. And the world depends on it.
Thank you, Mr. Rousseau. Chief McCarthy, you're recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to everybody for allowing me to participate in this discussion. And while I believe that we should keep the members of our communities who have been personally negatively impacted by Operation Vessel Surge at the center of our conversation and efforts, I've been asked here today to share my perspective regarding the activities of ICE expedited removal.
Chief, would you hold that mic just a little bit closer so we can hear you? Thank you.
Sorry. My perspective regarding the activities of ICE expedited removal teams and their impacts on local public safety. The Department of Homeland Security plays a vital role in ensuring our national security at its highest level. Homeland Security investigators are valuable partners and have collaborated with many local police departments, including the Mendota Heights Police Department. We work together enforcing violations of the criminal code to reduce the physical and economic harm to the people of Minnesota. And while we may support the mission of the Homeland Security, the tactics currently being employed by the teams in Minnesota are having a profoundly detrimental effect on the safety and security of our communities and in the relationship between local police departments and the people that we serve. Our officers are prohibited by law and policy from assisting in civil immigration enforcement conducted by ICE, and they're equally prohibited from interfering with or obstructing federal agents carrying out their duties. Recently, we had an officer who was waved down by a motorist on a busy street. By the time the officer was in position to contact the driver, ICE agents pulled up and began ordering the driver from the vehicle. Per our policy, our officer did not assist or obstruct, but it gave the impression that the officer was working with ICE, and it has led to anger and confusion from our community and from the officer involved. ICE agents have not communicated with our agency when operating in our city. Often, our officers only learn of ICE activity when fielding questions regarding masked, armed men removing people from public places, leading everyone to be afraid and frustrated by the lack of information. Neighboring agencies have spent considerable time and resources on possible kidnapping calls, only to learn days later that it was ICE enforcement action. We are diverting resources from our core duties to deal with the aftermath of ICE actions, ranging from reports of suspicious activity and abandoned vehicles to unsafe driving complaints. I and other officers watch anxiously as we see Minneapolis police officers standing between frightened community members and armed federal personnel, absorbing public anger, fear, and confusion for actions they did not initiate and cannot control. Local police officers are in a no-win situation, being called upon to de-escalate volatile situations without the tools, information, or authority required to do so effectively. Since 2020, we've made major reforms in policing to ensure professional conduct, enhance high level of training, transparency, and accountability throughout all the departments in the state of Minnesota.